The dusty streets of San Miguel were silent. Not the peaceful kind of silence, the kind that comes just before something explodes. Tension hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. The townsfolk hid behind shutters, peeking through cracks, whispering prayers, clutching rosaries. Because the man with no name, the stranger who'd once stirred chaos in their town, was back. Dear listeners, before we move forward, please subscribe my channel to hit 1,000 figure. They had seen him dragged away, beaten half to death by Ramon Rojo and his men. No one expected him to return. And yet, here he was, alive, walking straight into the lion's den. He moved slowly through the center of the street, poncho flapping in the breeze, spurs jingling with every step. Dust swirled around his boots like a rising storm. His eyes were locked forward, unreadable, unforgiving, like a man who had come not for money, not for justice, but for revenge. At the other end of the street, Ramon Rojo emerged with his gang, armed, cocky, and deadly, his rifle slung over his shoulder, his brothers flanking him. He laughed when he saw the stranger, mocking him. "I'll shoot you so full of holes, you won't know what hit you." But the man didn't flinch, didn't blink. He stood in the center of town, one man against many, and simply said, "You see, Ramon, when a man's got a gun in his hand, you know he's going to use it. But when he's got nothing," he paused, tipping his head ever so slightly, "then you better be very careful." It wasn't bravado. It wasn't even a threat. It was a warning. One that Ramon laughed off, unaware that he was walking straight into the most unforgettable duel in Western history. As the stranger stood firm in the middle of the street, the air around him thickened. It was the kind of silence that presses against your ears, heavy and suffocating, as if the town itself was holding its breath. Ramon Rojo squinted through the sunlight, his hand loosely gripping the lever-action rifle that had already taken too many lives. He wasn't nervous, not yet. He thought this was a joke, a ghost come back to die properly. The rest of the Rojo gang watched with amused confidence, rifles raised, fingers near triggers. They were sure this would be over in seconds. One shot, maybe two. The man was unarmed, or so it seemed, just standing there under his faded poncho, daring them to make a move. Ramon took that dare. With a smirk and a quick motion, he raised his rifle, took aim at the stranger's heart, and pulled the trigger. The shot cracked through the quiet like thunder across a canyon. Smoke curled from the barrel as the echo bounced between buildings. The man jerked backward slightly from the impact, but didn't fall. A collective gasp rippled through the hidden townsfolk. Ramon's smirk faded. He had fired straight into the man's chest. A clean shot. A kill shot. But the stranger remained standing. His poncho fluttered a bit with the breeze, but otherwise he didn't move. No blood, no stumble, just standing. Ramon narrowed his eyes. He cocked the rifle again and fired a second time. Same target. Another loud crack, another echo. Still, the man didn't go down. Ramon's confidence cracked like dry earth. Confusion settled in. He fired again and again. Bullets slammed into the man's chest, and yet he didn't even flinch now. He was staring straight at Ramon, calm and unreadable. Something was wrong, very wrong. The final shot clicked. The rifle was empty. And that's when the man took a step forward. The townspeople could barely comprehend it. Ramon was pale, shaken. The Rojo brothers exchanged nervous glances. The stranger reached slowly beneath his poncho and pulled back the flap. Beneath it, strapped to his chest, was a steel plate, dented from bullets, scorched from impact, but solid, unbreakable. The truth hit harder than the bullets had. He had planned this, all of it. The man with no name had turned Ramon's overconfidence into a weapon. Let him think he was winning. Let him waste every shot. Now the hunter was unarmed and about to become the hunted. The game had changed, and Ramon knew it. Ramon staggered back a half step, blinking in disbelief. The man he thought he'd gunned down stood tall, brushing dust from his poncho like he was untouchable, because in that moment he was. The silence returned, but now it was different, heavier, electric. The steel plate gleamed under the sun, battered by bullets but not broken, just like the man who wore it. The Rojo gang didn't laugh now. Their chuckles had turned into whispers. The power dynamic had flipped entirely, and they could feel it. This wasn't a man they could outnumber. This was a reckoning in human form. The stranger reached for his gun, slow and deliberate, not with panic, but with purpose. He didn't need speed to win this duel. He had already won. What came next was just the cleanup. He leveled his revolver, cold and steady, aimed directly at Ramon. "You see, Ramon," he said, voice low, sharp as a blade. "When you aim for a man's heart, you better make damn sure it's not made of steel." And then it began. The first shot echoed like a lightning strike. The bullet slammed into Ramon's shoulder, spinning him sideways. He screamed, not just from pain, but from the shock of being outplayed, outgunned, outsmarted. He tried to scramble for cover, but the stranger was already moving, stepping into the open like a predator in full control of the hunt. The second shot rang out, clean, precise, striking Ramon's rifle and sending it clattering across the ground. Panic erupted among the Rojo men. One raised his weapon, but it was too late. The man with no name spun, fired, dropped him in a heartbeat. Another tried to run. A mistake. A third shot slammed into his leg, sending him tumbling into the dirt. The stranger didn't miss. Not once. Every bullet had a destination. Every shot was justice. Within seconds, the street was a battleground, but only one side was falling. Ramon crawled behind a wagon wheel, bleeding and breathless, watching as his so-called gang was dismantled in seconds. He had mocked the stranger, tortured him, thought him dead. Now he was staring into the eyes of a man who had been forged in the fire of that beating and had come back harder. And he wasn't finished yet. The dust hadn't even settled. All around the street, Ramon's men lay wounded or dead. The once arrogant gang that ruled San Miguel with fear had crumbled like dry clay under the boots of a single man, a ghost they had thought buried. And now, only Ramon remained. He crawled from behind the wagon wheel, hand shaking, eyes wild. His shoulder throbbed, blood soaking through his shirt. He looked around and realized no backup was coming. His brothers were either dead or too afraid to move. The townspeople? Silent, watching from behind doors and broken windows, as if witnessing a judgment from above. The man with no name stood tall in the center of it all, still calm, still deadly. He stepped forward, one slow boot at a time, revolver steady in his hand, eyes locked on Ramon, not with hate, but with something colder, finality. Ramon's fingers scrambled across the dirt, searching for his fallen rifle. His breathing turned frantic. Pride burned in his chest, but fear was louder now. He found it. The rifle. But before he could lift it, a voice cut through the heat and the silence. "Try it, Ramon." The stranger's voice didn't shout. It didn't have to. It echoed like a judgment from the heavens. Ramon froze. He looked up, face streaked with dust and blood, sweat rolling down his temple. The rifle shook in his grip. He didn't want to die, but he couldn't walk away either. Not after everything. Not after being humiliated in front of the whole town. And so he made his choice. With a sudden scream, Ramon jerked the rifle up and pulled the trigger. But there was nothing, just a hollow click, empty. Ramon blinked, stunned. No bullet, no shot, just silence. The stranger didn't flinch. He didn't even raise an eyebrow. He simply raised his revolver, thumbed back the hammer, and aimed. A beat passed. Then, boom! The shot echoed across the town square. Ramon staggered backward, the force of the bullet spinning him before he collapsed into the dust, unmoving, his eyes wide open. A man who had ruled by fear, now conquered by justice. The street went still again. Only the wind moved now, rustling the edges of the stranger's poncho as he stood over the fallen bandit. The townspeople emerged slowly, cautiously, not cheering, not shouting, just staring in quiet awe. Because they had just seen a legend. A man who couldn't be broken, a man who brought down a gang with nothing but grit, steel, and 6 bullets. The gun smoke lingered in the air like a ghost refusing to leave. As Ramon Rojo's lifeless body lay in the dust, the townspeople stepped hesitantly from their hiding places. Doors creaked open. Feet cautiously stepped onto the blood-stained street. But no one dared to speak. They all simply stared at the man who had done what no army ever could, brought down the Rojo family. The man with no name didn't bask in the silence. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply turned, holstered his revolver with the ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times before, and walked. Slowly, boots crunching against dirt and broken glass, poncho rippling behind him. His eyes never left the horizon. The sheriff, useless for so long, tipped his hat in quiet respect. A young boy watched with awe, clutching a toy pistol tighter in his small hand. An old woman whispered a prayer, not for the dead, but for the man who had delivered them. He didn't stop to say goodbye. There was nothing left to say. He had come to settle a score, and he had done just that. The town could begin again. The fear was gone. The shadows that had haunted the streets had finally lifted. He reached the edge of town where his horse waited, calm and loyal. With one smooth motion, he climbed into the saddle, tipped his head to the wind, and began to ride. No one knew where he was going. No one ever did. But they would remember this moment forever. Not just the gunfight, or the steel plate, or the way he outsmarted Ramon. They would remember the silence after the last shot, the calm after the storm, the way he walked away without needing applause. Because legends don't need endings, they just ride into the next town.